Strange but true stories. Tales from the light side, the dark side, and the other side. I'm Steve White. When tragedy strikes, it's a natural inclination to want to know all of the details. When something terrible happens to someone you know and love, there also seems to be the desire to blame yourself. If only you had been there, or if only you had done something to prevent them from being there in the first place, they would still be here. The following story, submitted to us by a viewer just like you, tells the story of a young woman racked by guilt and sorrow after a family tragedy. Years later, she was given a gift to see what would really have happened that fateful day, and what would have happened if she would have been there. 13 years ago, my mom, my 10-year-old brother, and my 8-year-old brother were in a car accident. Only my 8-year-old brother survived. The accident happened in Oregon only 2 days after I had moved to South Carolina at the age of 18. So you need to know that before I can tell you this. 4 days ago, I got home from work and started making supper for my husband, myself, and our 4 kids. As the oven preheated, I went to sit on our front porch to just relax and enjoy the warm evening of spring. As I sat in the rocking chair, I suddenly got the sensation of falling. Then all of a sudden, I was back in Oregon, 13 years earlier. Everything about that time in my life was the same, except for one small detail. I hadn't moved to South Carolina yet. My mom and my brothers were on their way to the mountains to meet my stepdad for an impromptu long weekend. In this version, I joined them. I would have been riding in the front, except I had picked up the bad habit of smoking. I decided to drive my own car instead, a little white Ford Escort, and I followed behind my mom's red Suburban. My mom hated me smoking, but in my teenage rebellion, I didn't care. My brothers wanted to ride with me, but I wouldn't let them because I wouldn't have been able to smoke, so I made them ride with our mom. I followed behind on the winding roads through the mountains and saw my mom about to round a bend. Before I knew it, a semi-truck came around that bend, partially in their lane to avoid the edge of the road with snow and a cliff drop-off below. My mom slammed on her brakes and hit a patch of black ice, which spun the vehicle as the semi-truck T-boned them on the passenger side. I slammed on my brakes, jumped out of my car. I heard screaming, and I didn't even realize at first that it was coming from me. I ran over and saw a heartbreaking sight. It was much worse than we had been told about. My mom had thrown herself over my 10-year-old brother in an effort to shield him and took impact on her skull. The thing that haunted me the most were the sounds they made as they were dying. Some ladies stopped behind me, and the moment they came over and brushed past me, my vision faded. A day or two later in this vision, I stood in front of a mirror and stared into my own eyes. The grief, guilt, images, and sounds were too much to bear. I felt numb as I watched my arm raise, and I saw a knife in my hand make its way to my neck as blood dripped down from somewhere, presumably my wrists. I watched myself take my own life. Then everything faded again, and I found myself at what I can only describe as the edge of the universe. I was alone, but I didn't feel scared or alone. In front of me were millions of multicolored threads. I watched as the threads weaved to and fro in lightning speed. They were quite literally weaving the very fabric of my life. I traced many of the threads back and back and back, and I was able to see so many tiny, seemingly insignificant moments of my life. Picking up $1 from the ground here, someone sneezing over there, turning right down a road instead of left. All of these moments woven together to create all of the events that lead me to moving to South Carolina 2 days before the accident. Then everything zoomed in and I saw the Earth, then North America, then South Carolina, then the town I moved to, then the empty field where my house was to be built a few years later. As I was shown this image, I had a knowingness come into my mind that said, South Carolina is your cleft of the rock. Now this is significant because the cleft of the rock is something that was also very important to my mom. It meant a place of safety, to be set aside, out of harm's way, to be protected. I was shown how all the events that lead up to those 2 days before the accident all worked together to put me in a safe place. The accident still happened. The days, weeks, and years following have been hard, as it is when anyone loses loved ones. But not being there, not witnessing it, it saved my life. I grasped for air as it felt like the wind was knocked out of me. I was back sitting on my porch. Not a minute or even a second had really passed. My mind whirled as I tried to comprehend and process what had just happened. I hadn't even thought about the accident in weeks. Life has moved on, and although I love and miss them still, I hadn't been dwelling on the accident at all. I wanted to cry. So many emotions whirling around inside me. Sadness for the memories it stirred up, gratitude that my life was spared, and something else. It took me 2 days to realize what that something else was. There was an emptiness inside me. I had been carrying guilt for all these years for not being there. The guilt was so intertwined with the sadness and the mourning that they had never been separated. The guilt arrived the moment I learned what happened. The emotions were one and the same. For 13 years, I never knew they were different. But now I had been given a gift. The guilt was gone. I now know what would have happened had I been there that day. My children would have never been born. I never would have lived to see my move to South Carolina, and I wouldn't be here writing this to you today. I have accepted this gift now and understand that I experienced a supernatural kind of healing. But what happened to me in that blink of an eye? Did I experience some alternate reality? Did I slip through a portal in time and space? Nothing like this has ever happened in my 32 years of life, and something tells me it probably will never happen again. It hurts my head to try to understand the how. All I know is that I am alive, and I no longer carry the guilt of moving and not being there that day. I'm curious to know if I am the only one who has ever experienced something quite like this. This has been another strange but true story, submitted to us by a subscriber to Strange But True just like you. So what do you think? What did this woman experience? From the description, it was something way beyond a vivid daydream. So let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you have ever had an experience similar to this, let us know that as well. Subscribe if you haven't already, and sign up for notifications in the upper left corner so you know when the next video drops to the channel. Thanks for watching this video. I'm Steve White. Until next time.